Previously on the Lost Railways of County Down. The railway had reached Downpatrick, opening a new connection between Belfast and one of County Down's most important towns. But the ambitions of the railway companies were growing. Beyond Downpatrick, towards the coast, lay Dundrum and Newcastle, and in Newcastle, something was beginning to change. What had once been a small coastal settlement was becoming a fashionable seaside destination. The railway was about to transform it forever. If you've missed the previous episodes, be sure to check them out and follow the journey from the very beginning. New episodes are released every Wednesday and Saturday as we uncover the lost railway network of County Down. Now, let's continue our journey. By the middle of the 19th century, Newcastle was already attracting visitors. The town had something that Victorian travelers increasingly valued: sea air, open beaches, dramatic scenery, and rising directly behind the town, the magnificent Mountains of Mourne. For people living in the crowded industrial cities of Belfast and beyond, Newcastle offered something completely different. It was a place to escape. But getting there wasn't easy. The railway had reached Downpatrick in 1859, yet the journey south still ended there. Anyone wanting to continue towards Newcastle had to rely on roads and horse-drawn transport. That meant that the final part of the journey could still be slow, uncomfortable, and expensive. The answer seemed obvious: build a railway. But there was a problem. The original Belfast and County Down Railway did not simply extend its own line. Instead, a separate company was created: the Downpatrick, Dundrum, and Newcastle Railway. The plan was ambitious: extend the railway from Downpatrick through Dundrum and onwards to Newcastle, creating a direct railway connection with the growing seaside resort. The BCDR was closely involved with the new railway and would operate the line. Construction soon began. The route would stretch for around 11 miles, taking the railway through some of the most beautiful countryside in County Down. But this wasn't simply a matter of laying rails across a field. Engineers had to negotiate the landscape around Dundrum Bay, cross streams and low-lying ground, construct bridges and embankments, and find a route that could be operated safely by steam locomotives. One of the most fascinating parts of the journey was Dundrum. For centuries, Dundrum had been an important coastal settlement. Its harbor had supported trade and communications with the outside world, and the arrival of the railway gave the town another connection to the growing transport network of County Down. A railway station was built here, opening with the line. For the people of Dundrum, the railway meant that Belfast was no longer a distant journey by road. It also meant that Newcastle was now only another few miles away by train. And then came the final stretch. The railway continued south towards the coast. The landscape began to change. Fields gave way to dunes. The mountains grew larger on the horizon, and ahead lay Newcastle. On the 25th of March, 1869, the Downpatrick, Dundrum, and Newcastle Railway officially opened. The railway had finally reached the sea. The arrival of the first train into Newcastle was more than simply another railway opening. It marked the beginning of a completely new era for the town. Suddenly, people from Belfast and other parts of County Down could reach Newcastle by rail. And the railway company quickly realized something important. The passengers themselves could become the most valuable traffic of all. Tourism. The railway wasn't just transporting people to Newcastle, it was helping create the reason for them to go. Special excursion trains began bringing visitors towards the coast. Families could escape the city for the day. Visitors could walk along the beach. They could breathe the sea air. They could look across Dundrum Bay towards the mountains. And, importantly, they could now do it without spending hours traveling by horse and carriage. The railway had effectively turned Newcastle into a destination. The town began to grow. Hotels and boarding houses expanded. Businesses increasingly catered towards visitors. The promenade became busier, and the railway station became one of the main gateways into the town. Imagine arriving at Newcastle Station during a busy summer afternoon. A steam locomotive stands at the platform, its chimney filling the air with smoke. Carriages are packed with families. Children look out through the windows. Porters unload luggage. Holiday makers step onto the platform carrying cases, bags, and picnic baskets. Outside the station, horse-drawn vehicles wait to take passengers towards their accommodation. And beyond all of it stand the Mourne Mountains. For a Victorian traveler, this must have been an extraordinary arrival. The railway had brought the countryside to the city dweller. And it was only the beginning. As Newcastle's popularity grew, the BCDR became increasingly interested in promoting the town as a tourist destination. The company wasn't simply operating trains. It was investing in the future of Newcastle. One of the most important developments would come later in the 19th century. In 1889, the Royal County Down Golf Club was formally established at Newcastle. Golf would become another major attraction for visitors, and the railway made reaching the town considerably easier for people traveling from Belfast and beyond. But the BCDR wasn't finished. The company wanted to make Newcastle a destination where visitors would stay, not simply somewhere they would visit for a few hours. That ambition would eventually produce one of the most impressive railway hotels in Ireland, the Slieve Donard Hotel. Construction began in 1896. The enormous red brick building was designed to take advantage of Newcastle's spectacular surroundings. Its position beside the railway and close to the beach and golf links was no coincidence. The BCDR understood that if people were going to travel by train to Newcastle, they needed somewhere impressive to stay. When the Slieve Donard finally opened in 1898, it became one of the most ambitious hotels in the town. The railway had now become far more than a method of transportation. It was part of an entire tourism industry. Trains brought visitors. Hotels accommodated them. Golf attracted them. The mountains and sea provided the scenery, and Newcastle provided the destination. Did you know that the railway helped Newcastle become one of the most accessible seaside resorts in County Down? Before the railway arrived, reaching Newcastle from Belfast meant a much longer journey by road. But once the railway connected the town to the wider network, excursion trains could bring large numbers of visitors directly to the coast. The combination of the railway, the beach, the Mourne Mountains, and later attractions such as golf helped transform Newcastle into a major Victorian holiday destination. And we'd love to hear from you. Did your family ever use the old railway to Newcastle? Maybe you remember stories from parents or grandparents. Maybe you've discovered an old photograph, railway ticket, station building, or section of track bed. Leave us a comment below. Your stories and discoveries could help us uncover even more of the Lost Railway Network in future episodes. By the end of the 19th century, the railway had completely changed Newcastle. What had once been a relatively isolated coastal settlement had become one of the most popular seaside resorts in County Down, and the railway was at the center of it. As tourism grew, so did the trains. Excursion services brought crowds. Golfers traveled to Newcastle, hotels filled with visitors, and special services helped cater for the growing demand. The BCDR had discovered something incredibly valuable. It wasn't just connecting towns, it was creating destinations, and Newcastle would become one of the finest examples of that anywhere in Ireland. But while Newcastle was developing into a tourist center, the railway network itself was becoming much larger. Other companies were building their own lines, new branches were appearing, and the BCDR was beginning to absorb more railways into its expanding system. The small railway that had begun with an ambitious plan in the 1840s was becoming something much bigger, a network stretching across County Down, a network carrying passengers, livestock, coal, agricultural produce, and tourists. And there were still many more lines to discover. In the next episode, we'll leave the coast behind and follow another branch of the railway network, discovering how the BCDR reached yet more communities across County Down. Because Newcastle may have become the railway's great tourist destination, but it was only one piece of a much larger puzzle. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit that like button, subscribe to Drone Scene NI, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next part of the journey. Remember, there's a new episode every Wednesday and Saturday until the series is complete. So come with us as we uncover the stations, bridges, tracks, and stories that made up the lost railways of County Down. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.